In this video, you will learn to find the center and radius of a circle given an equation, how to find an equation of a circle, and then how to graph a circle given its equation. So to begin, we're actually going to start with the graphing of a circle. And so to graph a circle, if we know the center and the radius, we can graph any circle. All right, so for example, if we have the center of 1, -2, and the radius is 3, we can graph this very quick. So the center is at 1, -2, which would be right here. So to the right 1, down 2. And the radius is 3, meaning from the center point, if we go 3 to the right, we go 3 up, 3 to the left, and 3 down, we have points that are on the outside of the circle. So what we can do is we can just connect those points with a curve to make our circle, and that would look like this. So for all these examples we're going to work through, once you have the center and the radius, we can graph any circle just like that. All right, so our objective now is going to be, how can we find the center and the radius if you're given an equation of a circle? So in general, okay, our general form of a circle would look like this. So it looks really complicated. There's no numbers really in there except for the exponents. But what this means is the h and the k are just numbers, and that would be your center point. If you take h and k, that's your center. And then r, right here, whatever number is being squared, that is your radius. So what does that look like? So here we have x minus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals 9. So to find the center, what we do is we know it's going to be an x and a y value, and the x component comes from this -1. So you have to change the sign though. You have to change the sign because notice up here in general form it's x minus h. So h is the opposite of whatever that is. So if this is a -1, this becomes a +1. And our y value, because that's a +2, we change the sign. That becomes a -2. And that's your center. So we always will change the sign of whatever's with the x and the y term here in parentheses. We change the sign to get our center. And then the radius is going to be whatever we square to get to that, right? That is the radius squared. So what squared equals 9? That's going to be 3, right? So the radius would be 3 because 3 squared gives you 9. So basically, if you want a shortcut, you just take the square root of this number to find the radius. All right, let's try another example or two. So here we have an equation of x plus 3 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 16. So your center, okay, is a point. We find that by looking at this and this. All right, so the number with the x term here will give you the x value for the center by changing the sign. That's a -3. And this number with the y, we change the sign to get a +5. So your center is at the point -3, +5. And then your radius is found by taking the square root of the 16, which would be 4, right? Because 4 squared gives you 16, so the radius is 4. And by the way, for all these equations, we could verify that this would indeed give you a circle. We could verify that by plugging in points for x and for y, and you create a table. That's going to take a long time to do to prove that, but you could do that if you wanted, and you would find that you would indeed get a circle. All right, and here's another example. Here's example 3. And again, we're trying to find the center and the radius. This one looks a little different because this x has nothing in parentheses with it. So if it's helpful, you can think of this as x minus 0 squared plus y minus 3 squared equals 25. You don't have to actually write it out like that, but it might be helpful to think through it like that, where your center is found by taking this x value, changing the sign, which would still be a 0, and then change the sign of this number with the y. That becomes a +3. So your center is at 0, 3, and then the radius would be the square root of the 25, which is 5. All right, so we have the center and the radius. Now for all of these that we just showed you, once you have that center and radius, you can graph very quickly if you are asked to do so. All right, now from here we're going to switch gears and we're going to go back the other way, where we will be given the center and the radius, and you have to work backwards and find the equation. So how will this work? All right, so example 1, here we have the center at 2, 6, and the radius would be at 2, and we're trying to figure out what is our equation. So in general form, it's going to look like this. All right, where you have x minus something plus y minus something equals, and then this would be the radius squared. All right, so basically the number that goes here and here would be the 2 and the 6. So 2 and then 6. The radius is 2, so we have a 2 squared. And that's going to be your equation. So you have x minus 2 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals 4. All right, so this would be our equation, and we can verify because this sign needs to be opposite of this, and then this sign needs to be opposite of that. Let's try another example. Here, we're writing the equation of a circle with the center at 4, 0, and the radius at 1, or the radius is 1. All right, so again, for this one, it's going to be x minus something squared plus y minus something squared equals the radius squared. So this would be the 4 would go here, and then the 0 would go here, and the 1 would be squared to go there. So your equation is x minus 4 squared plus, that would be y squared, and then 1 squared would equal 1. All right, so your equation would look like this. And by the way, if this were a negative 4, this would become a positive 4. So that would be the difference there. So it would be x plus 4. Now to finish off, we want to increase the difficulty a little bit, where all these examples so far have already been in general form, right? So like when you found the center and the radius, it was already in the correct form for you. Now the question is, what if it's not in that form already? Can we make it into that form so that we can find the center and the radius, and so that we can graph the circle? So we're going to do 2 examples like that. And this first one right here, we see this equation. All right, first glance, you might be a little overwhelmed. You see just a lot of variables and a lot of terms. But big picture, what we're trying to do is we want to get it to be x plus or minus something squared plus y plus or minus something squared equaling a number. So to make that happen, we have to force it into a perfect square. So we do it twice. We want perfect squares for x and for y. So our big picture is we're going to need to complete the square twice. Once with the x terms and then once with the y terms. So that is our big picture idea for these types of problems. So to do that, we want to get the x terms by itself. So let's get the x squared plus 10x. Let's put that together. So x squared plus 10x. All right, and then the y squared and the minus 4y we'll put together. And then the plus 20, we'll bring that 20 over here to this side. All right, so it's going to be equal to negative 20. So from here, what we are doing is we want to add something with the x's, and then add something here with the y's, so that we have a perfect square created. All right, so to do that, remember we want to take half of this middle term and then square it. So half of 10 is 5. 5 squared would be 25. So you have 25 there. Don't forget you have to add 25 to the other side as well. And then for the y's, again, we take half of this middle term and then square it. Half of negative 4 is negative 2. Squared gives you a positive 4. And you have to do that to the other side as well. So we see that all typed up in the notes right here. And from this point, we have created a perfect square for both the x terms and the y terms. So make sure you know how to factor. All right, so we're assuming you can factor. This would be x plus 5 squared. And then this right here would be y minus 2 squared. And then on the right side, if you add all this together, we get 5 plus 4, which gives you 9. All right, so we have put this into the correct format. This is now in general form for a circle, and we can now find the center and the radius. The center would be the opposite of this, opposite of that, so -5, +2, and the radius would be the square root of the 9, which is a +3. So we have the center and the radius, and then if we want to, we can graph very quickly with the center point and then use the radius to find the size of the circle. All right, let's see one more example like this. Here we see example 2. And this one you could try by yourself first if you want. You can pause the video and then see if you can do this on your own. All right, so what we want to do for this problem is the same thing as the last one. And we're showing this because something a little different is going to happen at the end that we need to point out to you. But the steps are all the same to get to that point. All right, so to begin, big picture, remember, is we want to create a perfect square for the x's and the y's. And to do that, we want to group together the x terms. So we get x squared minus 8x. And then the y terms, y squared plus 6y. And then bring the 28 to the right side over here by subtracting. That'll give you -28. All right, we see that typed up right here as well. And we left a blank right here with the x's and with the y's because we want to add something to create a perfect square for each of those variables. All right, so for the x's, we can take half of this and square it. So half of -8 is -4, and then squared would give you a 16. And then don't forget to add 16 to the right side as well to keep it balanced. And then for this one, we take half of 6, which is 3, and then square 3 to get 9. So you add a 9 on the left and the right side. All right, we see that right here. And then, assuming we can factor, okay, this would be x minus 4 squared, and this would be y plus 3 squared. And then on the right side, we would have -28 plus 25, which is -3. All right, so what I want to point out to you is the center would be the same setup, right, before -3. But notice over here, okay, over there, that is supposed to give you the radius, right? So the radius squared would equal -3, so the radius would be the square root of -3. But notice that we cannot have a square root of a negative number. Well, we can, but it's not going to be real. So what this indicates is that because the radius is a square root of a negative number, that we cannot have a graph. There's no radius. There's no solution. All right, so this equation, if you see it like that, once you get into the correct format, where the radius over here on the side is a negative number, there's going to be no graph for that. So in this video, we explained how to find the center and radius of a circle, how to find the equation of a circle, how to also put an equation into general form so we can graph, and we also discussed how to graph a circle at the beginning. And that concludes our lesson for today. We will see you next time.